Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. I'm excited to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio, because in today's segment, we're going to be taking a break from the ordinary, and we're going to, shall we say, have a bit of a history lesson here. Now, if you remember correctly, on September 30th, I investigated two defunct fraternal organizations, okay? And I may eventually do that again. But in today's particular segment of Points of Light Radio, we will be investigating some of the history of secret societies and their origins. Now, secret societies, or shall we say secretive societies, have been around a lot longer than most of us think. Even people who are involved in esoteric type fraternal organizations might not be aware of how old this type of organization actually is. Now, in my inaugural segment of Points of Light Radio, I gave you this definition, the following definitions and characteristics of secret society. First of all, definitions generally rely on the degree to which the organization insists on secrecy and might involve the retention and transmission of secret knowledge, as well as a denial of membership or knowledge of the group. Many of these fraternal organizations or secret societies have a creation of a personal bonds between members of the organization and the use of secret rites or rituals which solidify the members. Does that sound familiar to you? Any of it so far? It does to me. Okay. Many of these secretive societies have carefully graded and progressed teachings. The teachings are available only to selected individuals, okay? There again, does that sound familiar? Okay. I will tell you right now that when you go through degrees within many of these fraternal organizations and the like, you do get when you go through the degrees give you teachings, okay? You only get them when you go into that degree. So anybody who is in a degree below that would not be aware of that. These teachings lead to hidden and unique truths, and I just mentioned that. So the truths bring personal benefits beyond the reach and even the understanding of the uninitiated. All right. Does any of that sound familiar so far? Well, you're going to see that that type of thing has been around much longer, like I said, than many of us are aware of. Right? Now, I'm going to start this investigation and find out as much as I can. And I want you to fill in the blanks. If you see, if I miss anything, you think I miss anything, things like that. This is your opportunity to really give me some feedback here, and I will appreciate it. So, are you still thirsty for knowledge? Are you still searching for the light? So let's just trim our lamps. Follow me. secret societies have been shrouded in mystery, and they were part of the religious traditions of the Greek and the Roman world, and I believe even the Egyptians had secret societies there as well. You know, these societies were believed to offer a door to the afterlife to their initiates. Now, I'm going to touch on two of them here, okay, during this particular segment of Points of Light Radio, and I'm open to discussion about others, and that's where your feedback is going to be important here. Okay, the first one, which I'm going to cover, is the cult of Isis. Now, I'm not talking about, that group that's been in the news over the last 10, 15 years. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something that came out of ancient Egypt, right? Now, the cult of Isis was imported by the Greeks and then by the Romans. Following, first of all, the Greeks conquered Egypt and imported it there. And when the Greeks were conquered by the Romans conquered, when the Greeks were conquered by the Romans, they imported it into Rome. Now, the mysteries of Isis were religious initiation rites that were performed in the cult of the Egyptian goddess Isis. The rituals were modeled on other mystery rites, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries, which I'm not going to get in here today. It's quite a deep study on its own, and in honor of the Greek goddess Demeter and Persephone. They originated sometime between the 3rd century before Common Era and the 2nd century Common Era. Many texts from the Roman Empire refer to Isis mysteries. One account describes the initiate undergoing elaborate ritual purification before descending into the innermost part of Isis temple, where he experiences a symbolic death and rebirth. Does that sound familiar? Okay. Those of us who have been involved in fraternalism at a little, like some of the ones with degree systems, yeah, that does sound familiar. Okay. Now, during this death and rebirth, the initiate would have a religious experience and was supposed to see the gods in person. Like I said, right now, this initiation, these rituals were designed to combine 3 broad strands. Does that sound familiar? Does that not sound like degrees? Okay. First of all, in the opening invocation to the deities of the cult of Isis, this was based on Egyptian nomenclature, right? The second phase is a hymn to Isis retelling the highlights of the death and resurrection of Osiris, and it was composed in a manner similar to the Homeric hymn to a Hellenic god. Then thirdly, there's an invocation to Isis. Now, you ever wonder where we get these third degrees? I've asked this before. Do you ever wonder where we get 3 degrees from? Like I said, you can kind of see the origins there. Or am I wrong here? You tell me. But I mean, like, yeah, we're like, you ever wonder where that comes from, right? Now, here's something interesting. Since not all local cults of Isis held mystery rites, not all their devotees would have undergone initiations. Isn't that interesting? So, like I said, that sounds a bit secretive, doesn't it? Obviously, almost like with many of the fraternal organizations and secret societies that invoke certain biblical stories. You know, you have church And then you have a group of, in some cases, believers getting together and designing rituals off of these stories. Okay, like I admit, but yeah, some of it does sound a bit familiar. Now, the mysteries of Isis, like those of other gods, continue to be performed into the late 4th century Common Era. Towards the end of the century, Christian emperors increasingly restricted the practice of non-Christian religions. Okay, does this mean they don't exist today? All right. Well, Freemasonry was definitely influenced. You could see where there were certain aspects of it. And to be fair, not just Freemasonry, other organizations were definitely influenced by the cult of Isis. Like I said, this idea of doing things in 3 degrees, or all-seeing eye, things like that was, you know what I mean? And to be fair, the Freemasons aren't the only one who use the all-seeing eye in their symbolism. So, right? But does this cult of Isis still exist today on some level? That's interesting. Right now, I've only encapsulated here, and I say this, I've only encapsulated here, okay? I want you, the listener and viewer, to fill in the blanks, okay? If you have any more information, let me know. In the meantime, trim your lance if you need to. Let's move on. Follow me. The next group, secretive group that I'm going to cover here, might offend some of my friends and brothers and sisters in the faith community. And I apologize if it does. If you want to tune out now, that's fine, you can. If not, you can stick around and take it up with me somehow. I will willingly wear it. I do understand why you might be offended, but the truth is, Christians down through the ages were often forced to do not only their worship, but also their commerce in secret, because of the fact that all the way back to biblical times, they've often had to endure some form of persecution. Christians as well as other faith communities, let's never forget. Right? But to start with, the ever-present threat of arrest and persecution often drove early Christians to find creative ways to keep God's command as well as hold fast to their faith while living in the midst of a hostile and often dangerous pagan culture. Now, I'm going to open this up with a Bible reading. Beginning Acts 12, verse 1. Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword, and so one of the apostles. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and the keepers, or guards, before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird thyself, and bind on thy sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, Cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. And he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true, which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. Moving down to verse 12. So The angel led Peter out of the prison, and when he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together and praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel came to hearken, named Rhoda. And when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness, but ran and told how Peter stood before the gate. And they said unto her, Thou art mad. But she constantly affirmed that it was even so. Then said they, It is his angel. But Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. And he, beckoning unto them with the hand to hold their peace, declared unto them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison, and he said, Go, show these things unto James and to the brethren. And he departed and went to another place. Does it not sound to you that those individuals were holding their prayer meeting in secret, right? Because the Roman and Jewish leadership was after them, right? And not allowing them to meet anymore, right? They were enduring some form of persecution, right? Is that not possible? Would you not agree with me? Moving forward, one method Christians used to communicate with one another was the use of secret imagery that pagans wouldn't have understood. For example, there was a symbol that believers in Asia would often scratch into the marble pavements of public places. This symbol essentially looked like a circle with a series of intersecting lines at its center, somewhat resembling an 8-spoked wheel. To the eyes of the Roman authorities and government officials, these drawings looked like children's games that had been scratched onto the pavement. But to believers, this symbol was actually a secret code. Now, you've seen an example of the symbol there. Now, if one separates the lines from the circle, one finds that this symbol is actually composed of 5 Greek letters, which overlap each other. In Greek, this sequence of letters is ekithys, or the Greek word for fish. To Christians, these letters hidden within the circular ekithys symbol conveyed so much more. First of all, the I is the first letter of Jesus, the way to pronounce that, which is the Greek name for Jesus. The X is the first letter of the word Christos, which is the Greek word for Christ. Right now, if you'll see the spelling of it there. The O is the first letter of the word Theos, which is the Greek word for God. The Y is the first letter of Ios, which is the Greek word for son. And what looks like an E there is the first letter of the word soter, which is the Greek word for savior. Now, I'm going to take a lot of flack from Greek scholars, or you armchair Greek scholars here. There again, I'll wear that. Go ahead and correct me. I welcome your criticism. That's what the feedback section is for, right? But, the Roman authorities and political officials might have thought that these symbols were a mere street game, but in reality, it was a secret code designed to help believers connect with each other and coordinate meetings. For example, if the symbol was scribbled next to a shop, it might have conveyed that the shop owner was a Christian. Don't forget, it was not just Christians' meetings that were disrupted at this point and not allowed. In many cases, their commerce was also being disrupted, so they could trust this shop owner if they saw that symbol in there, not just to worship with them, but to do some business with them, right? If it was drawn on a home, it might indicate that Christian gatherings were secretly being held there. But wherever this symbol was inscribed, it sent a message that believers were nearby. When Roman authorities began to pass laws restricting public and private gatherings of Christians, it quickly became difficult for believers to find safe locations where they could worship together. When the new laws took effect, Christians were forced to choose between staying true to their faith or following the laws of man. And don't forget, in the Bible, Peter even says that during a persecution, we ought to obey God rather than man. So Christians, even like I said, in biblical times, and don't forget, the book of Acts covers about 65 to 70 years in there when that first persecution took place, probably 35 years after Jesus went back to heaven, right? Peter was saying to them, we ought to obey God rather than men. Now, church meetings in the first century were mostly conducted in private residences. And Paul, if you read the epistles, Paul talks about that, right? He talks about, the church in his writings. He would say, near the end of a book, he talk about, say hello to, salute this gentleman and the church which is in his house, or this couple, I believe Priscilla and Aquila and stuff like that, the church which is in their house, right? Another place where believers sometimes met in secret was in suburban cemeteries on the outskirts of the cities. These were considered ideal meeting places because they were largely hidden from the eyes of the authorities. So what's the point I've been trying to convey here, right? One of them is that some people believe that secret societies are incompatible with those in the faith community, right? Many evangelicals believe that Christians should have no part in secret societies or fraternalism of any kind. Right? Catholics, another example, are forbidden from joining Freemasonry. However, there are Catholics in the craft, right? And I'm sure that they keep their membership hidden from their church or from their priests and other members of their faith. And of course, that has led to conspiracy theories and innuendo of its own. I will say this. As recently, and this is last week, I talked to a Freemason who told me that about half of his lodge were Catholics, right? Now, but I will say that during the past year that this podcast has been airing, I've been bringing you podcasts where you've seen various members of the faith community, evangelicals, Roman Catholics, and so on, who've appeared on this segment, and right, they've talked about their membership within these secret societies and fraternal organizations, and they believe that it does not run contrary to their faith, and if anything, it does enrich their faith. I will say this, that none of the organizations that I've belonged to I have never experienced anything that would run contrary to my faith, right? No one's ever drawn a pentagram on my forehead or splashed me with holy water or tried to anoint me with strange oil or asked me to repeat some sort of, right? So, right, if anything, I do remember when I was initiated into the Orange Lodge, most of the degrees there, they told us to not only to continue our church attendance, but encouraged us to, right, be involved in our churches, take an active role in them. And I think that's wonderful, right? But, right, to sum up, secret societies, or shall we say as I said before, secretive societies have existed BCE and even into biblical times, right? And you could see where many of these today's fraternal organizations receive their rituals from, can't you? And right, and but do these organizations run contrary to your faith? As one Pentecostal pastor said to me when I told him about my membership in fraternalism, he said, follow your heart. And I think that's something I will convey to you, right? If you, in your heart of hearts, don't believe that you should be involved in fraternalism because of your faith, then don't get involved. But if you do, right? But if you don't believe that it runs contrary to your faith, then like I said, follow your heart. There you have it, brothers and sisters. We're shedding light on the history of secret societies and their origins. Right? On September 30th, we investigated 2 defunct fraternal organizations, some of them with some very deep symbolism and ritual to them, if you remember correctly. And on the 28th of July, we discussed fraternal evolution, how fraternalism has evolved and changed down through the years. Their rituals and their symbols have evolved, right? But where did these rituals and these secretive mannerisms, these symbols, where did they emanate from? Well, hopefully we've answered at least some of that in this particular segment of Points of Light Radio, right? What do you think? Well, I actually welcome you to get back to me with your thoughts, right? I do, particularly on this particular subject. I mean, I really do welcome you to get back to me with your thoughts and everything, because to me, there again, some of these things are actually, open to debate, and there are places where you might know more about things that you might know more about than me. And like I said, those of you who are historians, I welcome you to actually give me your ideas on that. But that's all for now, brothers and sisters. But before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. And yes, please, particularly on this segment, I also welcome your comments and your input. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel as well as my Points of Light Radio store. But brothers and sisters, this has been a pleasure. And until we meet again, just step into the light.